Hey parents and coaches, are your kids using the right glove? The most important skill for youth athletes to learn is how to play proper catch. The problem is, most youth gloves are made with bad leather and are too big for small hands. They actually make it harder to play catch. That's why former Major League Baseball shortstop Kevin Smith created Cali gloves. Cali gloves are crafted from 100% Japanese kip leather and are the perfect size for kids. All Cali gloves come with palm slits, finger loops, and elastic wrist lacing that encourage proper hand placement, the right closing patterns, and give kids more confidence to go make plays. Cali gloves even allow parents to break in the glove without stretching out the fit. It's the glove Kevin wishes he had growing up, and the glove all his teammates want for their kids. Visit caligloves.com to learn more and help your kids play better catch. That's Cali Gloves, K-A-L-I gloves.com.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Dugout Dish Podcast. I am Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Mr. Keith Glasser. How are we doing today?
Great. How are you?
Good. We just cut/released 5 tips for 27s. We're going to do the same thing for 2028s. There will be a touch of redundancy here, but I think the conversation is slightly different. Priorities are a little bit different with the 28 class. 28 class can't get contacted by coaches until August 1st. So I think their focus is going to be a little bit different. But we're going to break down some stuff here, see if we can inform the masses on some things to focus on for the 2028 class. You ready to roll?
Ready.
All right, number 1. Weight room, nutrition. You've heard us talk about it. I'm going to hit on it again. I don't think we can talk about this enough. You want to get in the mix as a college player, you got to hit the weight room and you got to get your nutrition right. It is what moves the needle the most, in my opinion. You want a better swing, get stronger. You want to throw harder, get stronger. You want to run faster, get stronger. Put on weight, eat right. Doing all that kind of stuff is crazy important. And as I mentioned on the previous podcast, we've been doing a size analysis across college baseball. So I'm going to throw that out for this one here real quick too, just so everybody can get some of those numbers if you didn't listen the first time, to kind of frame up what we're talking about from a physicality perspective. But the average weight of a player across Division I baseball is 197 pounds. For a catcher, it's 200 pounds. Infielder, 195. Left-handed pitcher, 198. Right-handed pitcher, 202. Outfielder, 193. And that takes into account the SEC all the way down to the lowest RPI conference in the country. So you get some variability there, but the averages do capture it pretty well. For those of you who are more into the median as a measure of central tendency, we'll post that stuff on Twitter here in the future, and you can take a look at that as well. But I think it's pretty staggering to see the physicality across college baseball right now. And when you start to break it down from a conference perspective, I gave the rundown of a couple conferences on the previous one, and I'll do it again here real quick. But SEC average catcher is 6'1", 205. Infielder, 6'1", 200. Left-handed pitcher, about 6'2.5", 206. Outfielder, 6'1", 201. Right-handed pitcher, almost 6'3", 209 pounds. And then we'll go to the number 2 RPI conference, which is the ACC. And we'll kind of break that down real quick. So you got 6'1.5" catcher, 200 pounds. Infielders, about 6'1", 198. Left-handed pitchers, a little over 6'2", 203. Outfielders, 6'1", 196. Right-handed pitchers, about 6'2.5", 207 pounds. So you're talking about some physical human beings. And this kind of goes across the board, Division I, II, or III. I think for the purposes of the 2028s, a lot of folks are going to be focused on trying to pursue the Division I thing, which they should, but I think it's important for them to understand what they're working against. So, if you're a 6'2", 170-pound right-handed pitcher, one of the best ways for you to get in the mix is find a way to put on 20 pounds. And then you get yourself in that 70% range, right? Because here's a pretty wild number: 76% of right-handed pitchers in Division One baseball weigh at least 190 pounds. So if you want to get into that conversation, there are some physical things that you need to be able to do, and they're directly correlated to the more popular metrics with, um, spin rates and velocities and all that kind of stuff that we know is tangible, and we know that coaches are going to pay attention to. But it's not a coincidence that the size piece matches up with RPI ranking, and you see the trend that you would kind of expect with the higher RPI conferences being to the top right hand of the distribution or the scatter plot versus the lower RPI conferences are going to be closer down to the bottom left hand corner, kind of showcasing the size and the strength of the players in those particular conferences. So, but for me, this is number one, a clear cut number one for 2028 is really dialing in on the weight room, the nutrition, becoming a better athlete, moving better. I think that all kind of falls under this number one bullet for me. So,
sure. I mean, we talk about it all the time. My rant might sound, not my rant, but what I'm going to say might sound very similar to what I said last week. It's not just the lowest hanging fruit for kids to be able to get better at baseball, to bring their deficiencies along, to make their strengths sharper. But the reality is that college baseball is more physical. And it doesn't mean that just you have to be at those average sizes to be recruited immediately, but you have to look physical enough in the uniform that you're going to be able to put on the weight when you get to college to look like that, right? Like, if the average guy is 197 pounds, not all of them are showing up at 197. They're going to show up a little bit lighter, put on some weight while they get there, so that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be it right away. But it does also mean that it's going to be a hard mountain to climb if you're 5'8", 160 pounds. You're going to have to do some elite stuff in order to make up for that lack of physicality. And oh, by the way, when you get to college, you're going to be asked to get a little bit more physical while being able to maintain those elite skill sets. So if you're an infielder, you're probably going to defend at a super, super high rate at an elite level. Your bat to ball skills are going to be good because if you're 165 pounds, the likelihood of you jumping the yard and hitting a bunch of doubles is probably not that high. You're probably going to be a singles guy. So you got to be able to run, you got to be able to bunt, you got to be able to do those types of things that are going to make you a little bit more dynamic, be able to play in that offense. So it doesn't necessarily preclude you from getting to that level or to the Division I level if you're not that physical yet, but understand that there are some limitations, and there are going to be programs that are going to look at it and be like, hey, he's not physical enough, and it's not going to be the guy we're going to recruit. And that's just the reality of what it is right now. The other side of it is that the physicality piece is not just for you to get better at baseball. It's not for you to just, be able to throw harder, hit the ball harder, hit the ball further, throw it further, all of those things. It's also for you to be able to sustain what it is you're going to go through at the college level. We have Division I firing up on February 13th, which is another 4 weeks as we record this. Division II fires up usually around February 1st. I think it's a Sunday this year, so I think they can actually go a little bit earlier. Division III will be in full swing by middle to the end of February and into definitely by the first week of March. But there's a fair number of Division III schools that are going to play 40 games in 8 weeks in March and April. So it's a condensed season. You're playing a lot of games. There's a lot of travel. You got to be physical enough to be able to handle that, right? Like, there's a lot going on there. You're playing a lot of games. There's BP. There's, you're playing 56 games in a 15-week window, so there's a lot going on there. The other side of it is you have to practice. And I think this gets lost on people sometimes. And you and I have talked about this, and we talked about it on the podcast last week where, you get one off day a week. Generally speaking, it's going to be a Monday. So you're going to be playing baseball Tuesday through Sunday. Those first couple of weeks is just straight practice 6 days a week. You're an infielder, like you're taking ground balls 6 days a week. Mass fungos, drill work, fungos during BP, live fungos during BP, inter squads, all of those things. You got to be in shape to do it. And oh, by the way, when you get into some of these inter squads, and it happens in the fall, but you get them into the spring, like you catch a nice day on a Saturday where you can get outside if you're in the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic and you're going to go inter squad. Like, we're not playing a 9-inning inter squad. Like we're playing an 18, 20 inning inter squad because we need to get guys up and down off the mound. We need to get the hitters live at bats. We need to see balls off a bat live on the field. Like this is a marathon that we're about to go through. And oh, by the way, you got to wake up and do it again on Sunday. So you have to be in shape to do that stuff. And the physicality part, I think, is obviously it's glaringly obvious how physical college baseball has become. But the obvious things are, you can throw the ball harder, you can hit it further, you can do these things, but it's more than just that. It's go a little bit deeper. It's being able to handle what you're going to be asked to do. It's being able to get through the season. It's being able to practice. It's all of these things, and your body will start to break down. And you want to give your body the best chance to not break down over the course of those 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 15 weeks, 17 weeks, whatever it might be, because of the schools that you're looking at the Division I level, and you went through all of them as we go through Division II and III together. I think it's no secret when you get to the end of the year, generally speaking, the teams that are left in Omaha are the more physical ones that are able to withstand what it is that they're going to go through over the course of those 60, 70, 80 games. So it holds true when you do this. You got to start taking it seriously. You got to get in the weight room. You got to be able to fall in love with it, because it's going to be a huge piece of your college athlete experience when you get to college.
Yeah, everything you just hit on is so valuable. It goes just beyond the recruiting, but it's the preparation for everything that you're going to have to undertake as a student athlete at the college level. It's a different level of effort. It's a different level of commitment. It's a different level of stress when you're talking about what's expected of you on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think that can be understated. Number 2 on our list. This was on our list for the 27s as well, but a little bit farther down. But I think for 2028, it's not getting caught up in the recruiting stuff that can help you, and being a little bit more. You should have that carrot out in front of you. You should absolutely start to think about a plan and all that kind of stuff. And we'll get to that here at the end. But I think you got to tackle what's in front of you, right? In 2028, you're sophomores. Okay, well, most of you probably didn't play varsity as a freshman. So can we check the varsity box? Can we make the varsity team? Can we go and have a good high school season? Even if you don't play varsity, can you go and have a really good JV season? Right? Can you start to build a little bit of resume? Can you start to establish yourself as a quality player in your local high school league, in your local high school county, maybe even your state? That's where it starts. Coaches do pay attention to performance. Right? It's not just about metrics. It's not just about how hard you throw, how fast you run, or how far you hit the ball. They do need to see that you have a certain level of capability. You got to be able to put together some stats. You got to show a certain level of dominance at the high school level. It's really, really hard to be a college baseball player without being a really good high school baseball player first. And you want to get on some coaches' radars. You want people to start to pay attention to you. One of the best ways to do it is go make a little bit of noise in your high school season. So having some focus on making that varsity team, finding a way to get in the lineup every day, start to establish yourself as a good player in the region. That's kind of the first step to all of this starting to take place for you, whether it's in the summer or whether it's a year from now as a 2028 or a year and a half from now, which is when most of it will happen for 2028. But step number 1 is let's go have a really good high school season. And I think oftentimes in this process, we're so fixated on what the end result is, well, when am I going to commit? Who am I going to commit to? What type of school am I going to go to? Where we lose sight of, well, you get a high school season coming up here in a couple of weeks. If you're down south, these guys are opening up in a month. If you're up in the Northeast or in some of the colder weather climates in the United States, you're going to open up in that late March, early April timeframe. You still got a little bit of time to prep, but at the end of the day, you got to go and be a really good high school player first. And I think that it would be advisable to make sure that is a significant focus of your time right now. Is let's go be good locally first.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think if you're a 28, 29, younger, it's the goal should be to make the varsity team, right? And it depends on where you're at, what it looks like. I've heard horror stories, but I think that having a good JV season is just as valuable. It's along the same lines as the 27s. Is it gives you a 3-month ramp up to get ready for the summer. And I think the other side of it, especially with 28s, is that the vast majority of college baseball, I'm not going to say doesn't care about 28s, but they're not actively recruiting the 28 class this summer, right? Like unless we're talking about a guy who's guys who are going to go play in the SEC, ACC, Big 12, your Power Fours, yeah, okay, but that's 3% of college baseball. 97% of it isn't really going to be focused on the 2028 class this summer. They're going to be focused on the 27 class. But it gives you 3 months of playing baseball to get better at what you're doing day in and day out. If you want to make the varsity team and that's a goal, awesome. But if you're an underclassman, you're going to make the varsity team and not play at all. That's 3 months of development of you just sitting on the bench. So now you're going to start the summer and you're not in game shape. You haven't played. Your timing's off, all of this stuff, right? So you have to re-ramp back up, and you probably really start hitting your stride towards the end of the summer and into the fall when, sometimes it's ego, sometimes it's pride. Like, check it at the door, go play JV and get 40, 50 at-bats and get better over the course of those 20 games, right? And be able to get yourself prepped so that when you get into this summer, you feel really good about where you're at. So your goal should be to make the varsity team. If you don't, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of players out there who go play college baseball who didn't play varsity as a freshman and sophomore, right? Like, everyone develops differently at this game. It doesn't really matter. No one's going to look at it and be like, "Whew, he played JV as a sophomore. We can't recruit him even though he's 88 to 91 and has a Snapdragon slider." Like, no, man, that stuff does not matter. The things that matter are where you're at when you get to a recruitable age. And taking 3 months off, I want to say taking it off, but playing on the varsity team but not playing on the varsity team is a detriment, in my opinion. So it should be a goal, but then the goal also should be, to be one of the better players on your team, be one of the better players in the league, be one of the better players in your area. That you need to keep leveling up so that when you get to recruitable age, it's like, all right, hey man, like, this kid was first team all league and first team all city and first team all area, whatever it all is, right? So that, like, there's some credential there of that you're one of the better players in the area, and okay, he's proven himself from a gameplay standpoint, at least from an offensive or from a pitching standpoint, that this kid's worth kicking the tires on to see if he's a good fit for our program. So, those should be the goals. And I think sometimes we, parents and people get caught up in things that don't matter. And I think, sometimes making the varsity team as an underclassman and not playing is not what you think it is, right? Like, if you call me and tell me that you made varsity as a freshman and you had 4 at-bats, my question is going to be like, why didn't you just play JV? You would have got a lot more at-bats and probably gotten a lot better than sitting on the bench. And I think, conversely, there's high school coaches out there that think this way too. Like, oh, he's going to be a good player, so I'm going to take him with me so they can learn for a year, for this season. Like, you're not doing the kid any service. He's not playing. Like, you get better by playing. So, I think that happens as well. So don't get caught up in the varsity stuff. Get caught up in getting quality at bats and playing as much as you can so that you can set the stage for the summer. Where again, 97% of college baseball is not focused on 2028s. So play the summer out where you can just get better and develop your skill set and play a lot of baseball.
Well said. Number 3 on our list was number 1 on our list for 2027s. And the reason that it's number 3 for the 2028s is because I think there's a little bit more of a future projection in kind of a development aspect to this portion of it. But the honest assessment, like, this is a great time of year to sit down with somebody who has experience, who understands college baseball, who understands the different levels of play, the different type of programs that exist, your current state of where you're at, and where you might be tracking to. I think this is an incredibly important time for people to set the baseline of where they're at, to plot their development moving forward. To your point, and it's I think we'll continue to reiterate this, and it's something we'll definitely reiterate at the end. But for most 2028s, your recruiting process is going to be 12 to 16 months away. Just the reality of it. To your point, most 2028s are going to get recruited next spring, next summer. Um, but it's important to have a baseline assessment of where you're at. Where are you at physically? How much do you weigh? How hard are you throwing? What are your exit velocities? What are you running the 60 in? What's your arm speed? If you're in a category where you might line up to be one of the smaller percentage of guys who end up getting phone calls and doing visits and all that fun stuff in August and September, all right, well that's great because it'll lead into kind of what we talk about at the back end of this. But for most guys, it's a point of, all right, well, you're 78 to 81 and you're a right-handed pitcher right now. And we need to continue to put together a plan for your long-term development so we can get you up into those velocity ranges and allow you to be able to do some of the stuff physically that's going to put you on a path to be a college player. You might not be a college player right now, and that's okay. This process unfolds at different rates at different times for everybody. But getting that honest assessment right now it's just a nice checkpoint in the process for you to go, all right, end of January, going into my sophomore year, here is where I was at. Okay, well, here's where I want to go. Well, now you have an idea of where you're at and where you want to go, and you can start to plot a path forward and do some of that development stuff. And I think the guys who do this and the families who do this and do it honestly are able to, one, save time and money and put that money and time into things that are going to be beneficial for them. There's going to be some 28s who are 80-mile-an-hour right-handed pitchers who are going to go to a bunch of showcases and camps this summer that are not going to prove fruitful for them because they're not recruitable right now. I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but it's the truth. The families who look at and the players who look at it and go, you know what, I got to get better, are going to put their time and money into the weight room. They're going to put it into nutrition. They're going to put it into getting with somebody who can help them get better in addition to playing their summer. And when it's time for them to be recruited, they're going to be there quicker and they're going to be in a better position, and they're not going to be wasting time traveling with hotels and all kinds of stuff when it's really not going to be a fruitful event for them. So, but for me, this piece for 2028 is largely focused on identifying where you're at and identifying where you need to go and the pieces of the puzzle and the steps you need to take to get there.
Sure. I think the summer for 2028s is probably going to be even slower than what the 2026s, experienced. We've talked about it a lot on this with the rule changes and the transfer portal and contact and blah, 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 blah. One, you need to understand as 2028 that no one can reach out to you with recruiting talks until August of this year. Right? Yeah. So the math,
nodding my head. Yes,
math is hard. Well, it was a rhetorical. I think it was a rhetorical, right? I'm doing the math in my head. I was a history major. I'm not the best at it. But the college coaches at the Division I level can't reach out to you until August 1st of this year because that's when you're going into your junior year of high school. So anything before that can only be camp stuff, and obviously you can have conversations if you're out there on their on-campus camp. But they can't have any recruiting talks with you beforehand. So understand that first and foremost. But I think we talked about it on here, and I think we saw it with what we do, that the 2027 class last year was uber slow because of all of the things I just mentioned. I think this year is going to be even slower because coaches have kind of gotten a feel for, we can kind of let guys develop. These kids are getting, they're developing. We don't really need to go see them because we don't really have to waste our time going and seeing them. We can really lock in on the 2027s that we need to see to make sure that we have a really good evaluation on them before we offer them and bring them into our campus and invite these 28s to camp. And hopefully we get a little bit of a feel for where they're at in their development, what we think our projections might be for them, and kind of do it that way. That's not to say that if they see you at a tournament or they see you, at a showcase, things like that, that they're not going to take notes and circle your name and write things down and come, recruiting time that they reach out, right? That still is a possibility, but just understand that it's going to be a lot slower right? Like, don't hit the panic button if you're at a tournament and it's like, wow, there's no coaches here. Like, yeah, man, you're 2028 and it's June, and they're not like, they're more focused on the transfer portal in 2027s right now. They're not even worried about the 2028 class. Like, so just go develop and get better at playing baseball and sharpen your game and be really good there, so that next summer when you come of age to be recruited in that cycle, you're further along than where you should have been. Don't worry about being recruited right now. It's not something that needs to be at the forefront of your mind. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to kind of wrap their minds around, but the reality is that, 90, I would argue 87% plus of 2027s are going to be recruited this summer. So, it's probably going to be even less than the 20 or even more in the 28s. Like, probably 90 plus will be recruited the following summer in 2027. So, it's have the patience, understand that, you just need to make sure that you're continuing to develop. You're getting your at-bats, you're getting your innings, you're getting better on defensively. You're doing all the things it is that you need to do in order to make sure that you're upping your game, getting in the weight room, being more physical, because we just talked about it, all of those things. So that next summer when everyone's eyes are on, you're giving yourself the best opportunity to be recruited when the time comes. But the patience, I think, is one of the hard things, because, and I get it. You're going to showcases, you're going to tournaments, you want, college coaches to be there. The reality is it's probably going to be few and far between, depending on where you are, right? Georgia, sure, probably going to be some coaches there, but even then, it depends on where you're at. Some of the bigger ones, yeah, there's going to be some coaches, but if you're just going to the Memorial Day Classic at Connecticut Sports Complex, I don't even know if that still exists. The likelihood of there being a lot of coaches there to lock in on 2028s is low, and it's not because they don't care. It's just because their focus needs to be towards the transfer portal / the 2027 class, not the 28 class.
100%.
I didn't want Connecticut Sports Complex to catch a stray there. I wasn't saying anything negative. It was just one of the things that popped into my mind of somewhere where I went that isn't, a staple, if you will.
Yeah, probably get canceled because of that comment.
Yeah, no, I love, like Connecticut, like the people there. Don't catch a stray. If you're the parent of a high school baseball player with college aspirations, you already know the recruiting process can feel overwhelming. Endless showcases, nonstop emails, and big promises with very little clarity. That's why we recommend Diamond College Showcase Camps, the nation's premier academic baseball showcase. At Diamond College Showcases, every college coach in attendance is there with a purpose: to coach, instruct, evaluate, and recruit. Every player is seen, every player is engaged, and every family leaves with a clear understanding of where they truly stand. This is not a mass camp. College coaches run the drills, evaluate every athlete, and provide honest professional feedback that you can trust. Diamond College Showcase Camps are built for serious student athletes who value both baseball and academics. If you're looking for transparency, clarity, and a recruiting experience that respects your time and your player's future, Diamond College Showcase is the place to be. To learn more, visit diamondcollegeshowcase.com.
Number 4 on my list, and it might not be an obvious one. It's one that I think is important to me and you with our backgrounds in some of the schools that we coached at, is that you got to nail your academics, right? You're a sophomore, you're going into the second semester, the 5th or 6th trimester, depending on how your school works. But basically, you're going into the second half of your sophomore year. You don't get a redo on your grades, on your transcript. If you get a C in algebra as a sophomore that never leaves your transcript, you get a C. I implore the players, specifically mom and dad, I'm sure this isn't a hard conversation for us to have with you, but for the players, you got to continue, and you got to make sure that you have your foot on the gas, not just on the baseball stuff, but you need to do well in the classroom. It doesn't mean that you have to set yourself up to go be an Ivy League student. But what I can tell you, and you can nail this down too, because you experienced at a head coach at an elite academic school. You don't want doors to close because of something that you did that was controllable for you, and that is putting some effort in the classroom and finding the time to make sure that you're doing well, right? When you get to college, people say, well, C's get degrees, but yeah, like in high school, too many C's is going to close a lot of doors for you academically. And as much pull as some of these schools may have perceived pull they have with admissions, there's a lot of schools that it's just as simple as, hey, your transcript's not good enough. We can't get you in. And I like you as a player, but now I can't recruit you. Right. If we're at RPI, when you were at RPI, if you had a guy who had 3 C's in math classes throughout his career, like that's going to be a much harder admit for you. And I think a lot of times for high school students, it's not a matter of intelligence, it's a matter of effort. And you have a chance to make sure that you lay the groundwork here, right? If you're at 2027, you're a little bit farther down the road. It's a little bit of a different conversation. It's more about let's make sure we do what we can here in the next, 2 semesters. But for 2028, you've got time to continue to build your academic resume. You've got time to put together a schedule for next fall that's going to potentially get you on track to get into some of those high academic schools. Like if you are somebody who has your eyes on the Ivy League or high academic institutions, your strength of schedule, balancing out APs and honors courses, like these are all really important things. And I think that for the 2028 class and, definitely for the 2029 class, if we end up cutting a podcast for them, the academic portion can't get overlooked. And I think it's something that people need to take serious, and you need to take advantage of the time that you have in order to do well, because doors will stay open. There's more money available at the back end of this. Not everybody gets to be a full scholarship Division I player. A lot of guys are going to play Division III baseball, and one of the best ways to get money at that level is to be a really good student. And with the cost of tuition, the cost of education these days, you want to make sure that you give yourself a chance to have access to some of those funds. And one of the best ways to do it is be a really good student.
Yeah, I think the student piece gets lost sometimes. In high school, you have to put forth the effort to have the grades that are going to leave as many doors open to you as possible, right? You could be a great student and go to a school that isn't considered a super high-end academics school to play baseball, and you're going to command a lot of academic money, which is going to offset the cost. But it leaves the most doors open to you. It's really hard to sit there and, look at a transcript and be like, gosh, I'm not going to be able to get this in. And, or this is super borderline. And I don't know if this kid's going to be able to be admissible at our school. And it stinks because you really like the kid. You really like how he played. You really think he'd be good in your program. But, the grades are holding it up. Or, the flip side to it is, you mentioned 2 C's in math. And, if it's a school like an RPI where you're looking to get into the STEM field, it's going to be really hard to get into a school like that with those types of grades on your transcript. Doesn't matter what your SAT score is. Doesn't matter that. They're going to look at the rigor and be like, oh, he took a regular physics class and got a C-. I don't know how he's going to be able to handle physics here because he's probably going to fail out. And they don't want to bring in students who, not to say they don't want to bring in students that are going to fail, but they don't want to bring in students that they're setting up for failure, right? They have a proven track record of being able to get these types of kids through college with these grades, right? So it gets pretty difficult for coaches to be able to get guys in when the transcript isn't as strong as it could be. And that doesn't mean they have to take all the APs in the world or all the honors courses, but if you have some, take some. If you're looking to get into the high academic world, the likelihood of you needing APs or honors on your transcript are kind of high, so it's something that you want to do to be able to give yourself the best opportunity to open as many doors as you can to play at the next level. And the flip side to it again is that the better your grades are, the more merit scholarship money it is that you're going to command. When you have schools that can stack, if you're a scholarship guy, they can throw money on top of it and your merit scholarship package and make that package even better. So I think in a day and age where trying hard is not cool anymore. It baffles me because those are people that if you want to go to a really good school or you want to get in and be the best that you can, then, you're going to have to do well in the classroom. And I think it clues you into some other things, right? Like if he's going to work hard in the classroom, the likelihood of him working hard on the field is pretty high. They generally go hand in hand, so it's, and when things get tough, what do? Do they not want to try in that class? Are they just going to roll over, fold? Or, do they really try to study hard? And listen, man, if a C is the best you can get in pre-calc and you studied your butt off and, you got a tutor and you did all this, good on you, man. There's effort there. No one's going to hold that against you. But if you're just not going to try and you're just going to knock down a C because, well, I just don't really care. Like, it's going to clue me into the fact of like, I don't know if I want this kid in my program because when it gets tough, he's going to quit and he's going to face adversity here. So it's just parallels that coaches will draw in the recruiting process on some of this stuff. And it's worth at least having in your mind that stuff can happen.
Yeah. And I think that given our backgrounds, it's just something that's important to us. And we know how impactful it can be in the long run for families when, doors are open for folks. It makes the process, you got more options. And I think the process goes smoother if you don't have to cross off a bunch of schools because academically you didn't do your part. And anybody who's a sophomore in high school right now, like you have a chance to make sure that that's not the case for you. So put in the effort, put in the time, and go and do as well as you can. To your point, like if a B is the best you can do, don't get a C, get a B. That's simple. Don't be afraid to ask for help either. Tutors, extra time with teachers, whatever it takes. That's the type of stuff that you need to do when you get to college, anyways. So both on and off the field, you got to do some extra work. You got to do some stuff that might be uncomfortable. You got to do some stuff that might be hard. So put in the time and the effort to get it done there. Number 5, this is kind of a two-parter in my head, but it's the planning for summer, right? And I think that there's 2 tiers to this, right? I think there is, for the vast majority of 2028, the summer is going to be about your travel ball schedule, making sure you're on a team that's going to get at bats, making sure that a place you're going to go and compete, and you're going to get a bunch of playing time, and you're going to get a bunch of experience. And for most guys, it shouldn't be focused on how do we supplement our exposure, because I think that for most guys, or a lot of guys, it's not the right time to go get exposure. And I think that that's part of the honest assessment piece that we talked about is, understanding where you fit in the grand scheme of things, right? And if you're not in that Division I baseball conversation at the moment, then going to a bunch of showcases and a bunch of camps might not be the best use of your time. And spending money to get exposure doesn't guarantee you that you're going to get recruited at that moment. You need to be recruitable given the time frame. And if you're 2028 this summer, you kind of firmly have to be in that Division I category in order to really warrant, going to somebody's on-campus camp or spending, a bunch of money to go to a big showcase where you're in front of a bunch of schools. And it's a conversation that I think is family level. I think that each individual case needs to be handled tactfully and kind of understand where you fit. But I think for a lot of guys, it's planning out the summer in terms of, well, how do we make sure that we're in the weight room? How do we make sure that get some time with, maybe our hitting coach or maybe our pitching coach, and we make sure that we're continuing to develop, and you look at this summer as steps in your development process, not just a recruiting piece. And then there's the other side of it where there is going to be a subset of individuals who are in that category where it's like, all right, you're 2028, you're 87 to 90, you're 6'2", you're 190 pounds. Well, the conversation with that player is a little bit different than the righty who's 80 to 82. And you may need to start to think about, all right, well, where do I fit in the grand scheme of things? And do I need to get in front of some of these coaches? And how do I get in front of these coaches? Is it on-campus camps? Do I need to go to a workout so that I can qualify, potentially get picked for the futures games or something like that? So for me, there's 2 very distinct conversations that can happen here. Your honest assessment and understanding where you fit is really going to dictate what that conversation looks like.
Yeah, no, I think you 100% right. I don't think with the 28s, and I guess I talked about it at length earlier in this podcast of how slow I think the summer is going to go, just based off of what last year looked like. The need to go to supplement your summer schedule with a ton of showcases, camps, and clinics really isn't that necessary. You want to go to one or two. I can see the argument, see where your metrics are at, things like that. If you don't really have any, okay, yeah. And I think, maybe towards the end of the summer and into the fall, depending on where you're at and the conversations you've had with your coaches, and if you've had any contact with college coaches, maybe sign up for an on-campus camp in the late summer, early fall to kind of see where you're at. But I would suggest a camp where you're a Division I camp where there's going to be a bunch of schools that are going to be in attendance, right? Where you can get a little bit more bang for your buck there, instead of going to some uber expensive one. Go to one that costs $120 and there's going to be 7 other schools there and 6 of them are Division III, just to kind of see where you stack up. And I think that it's just understanding that what this landscape looks like. If you're not really being recruited, you're a middle of the road guy, but you have college aspirations. And I say middle of the road of hey, I think that you have some ability to be able to play college baseball. Have that conversation and see where you might fit and go from there. The other would be, to your point, if you're, trending in the Division I direction of, maybe you do have to go to some events to go to see if you can qualify for the futures games and things like that, where it's worth it. It's one of the highest, if not the highest, recruited event for underclassmen in the country, right? So, there's 2 different conversations, and I think the vast majority of people fall into the first one of have an honest conversation with somebody about where you fit in midway through the summer, and start to kind of figure out what types of camps and showcases are going to get you in front of the coaches that you just want to get on their radar. And I think that that's an important distinction to make of getting on coaches' radar at when not necessarily when you feel you're ready, but when you have conversations with people that can say, hey man, this is where I think that you could potentially slot in, and kind of go from there. Because if you're just going to do it blindly, you might end up at Vanderbilt camp and you can't play in the SEC, and it's going to be a giant waste of money for you. So, and I shouldn't say it's a giant waste of money. They're going to have a ton of coaches there that are going to teach you things about the game. So it's not going to be a giant waste. But if you're going there solely because you want to play at Vanderbilt, and you can't play at that level, that's likely going to be a more of a loss than it is a gain. So being able to have those conversations with, coaches, your high school coach, your travel coach, people that, maybe you get lessons from, people like us, things like that, where you can get a feel for where it is you fit in, and kind of start to plot a path forward for what the fall, the off season, and then next year looks like, so that you put yourself in the best chance to be recruitable next year.
Yeah. I don't have much to add to that. I think I have a bonus tip. I think we echo the same sentiments, but bonus tip here is everybody's timeline is going to be different. And I think that for 2028, this is a very true statement, is that there's going to be some guys who get some calls on August 1st. Most guys are not. Right? I've had some talks with some college coaches that we were kind of joking, on August 2nd last year, we've just been hammering the phones. And he's like, dude, I remember calling guys last year and calling 100 guys over the course of 2 or 3 days. He's like, I have 11 guys I'm reaching out to this year because everything is slowed down.
Yep.
And, the most guys in the 28 class, and I'm talking the large majority of guys, are not getting a call on August 1st. And that is okay, because things have changed. These coaches are taking more time. You have to stick out like a sore thumb in the recruiting process to be one of those early 2028s. And I think that social media can be very beneficial for a lot of reasons, specifically in the recruiting process. But I also think at times it can be really negative. It can have a really negative impact on kind of the mental stability of high school kids who are going through this process. When you see guys who are going to commit, and it seems like everybody's committing, because you scroll through and you see 10 guys committed, and it's like, well, there's 10,000 plus college baseball players. That's a really small sample size to kind of make that distinction. But it can be, it can kind of get to you. And I would implore people to not worry about what other people are doing and what other people are committing. Or, you talk to your buddy and he's going to this and that camp and this and that camp and this and that camp, and you feel like, well, should I be doing that? Well, his process, one, they might not be doing the right thing. They might be, the folks that are just throwing a bunch of money at the problem and thinking that, getting a ton of exposure is what needs to be done, versus making kind of an informed decision on when and where and how. But don't get caught up in what other people are doing. Focus on the things that you can control. Focus on trying to become the best version of yourself on and off the field. And don't worry about your timeline. In the grand scheme of things, nobody cares about when you commit. It doesn't matter, right? And you can track these kind of stories all the way up to professional baseball, to professional sports. I heard Nick Saban say something the other day about Damian Harris was a 5-star recruit. Josh Jacobs was a no-star recruit. And he was talking about the people that give stars and the people who do rankings, they're not the coaches who make these decisions. Well, Josh Jacobs was a first rounder and is one of the best running backs in the NFL. Damian Harris is no longer in the NFL. Like, if Josh Jacobs' story was written based on the number of stars he had in high school, he wouldn't be where he is. You're not judged by how good you are when you're 15 or 16 years old. And I think that for 2028, focus on the things that are important to you. Focus on the things that are valuable, getting stronger, competing, enjoying it, making sure that you're having fun playing baseball. And, if you're doing the right things and you're focused on the right things, if you're focused on the academics, if you're focused on the weight room and you're focused on being a really good teammate, it tends to work out for those guys. And the timeline it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's about trying to find the right place and the right fit. So, if you're one of those guys who, may not get recruited this summer, don't worry about it. Keep plugging away, keep getting after it. And if you need help trying to navigate this stuff, this is something that's near and dear to our hearts. It's the reason that we do it, is trying to help families get this right. And, this is a complex process. It can be stressful, but focus on what you can control.
Yeah, I think, comparison is a thief of joy. Everyone's process can be different. I've read a handful of books on Saban, and I think that, it's very evident in the books that he gives no credence to what other people think in the recruiting process. Like, he's going to trust his eyes. I think one of the books I read, that Jacob Hester was actually someone that he referenced. For those of you young bucks out there who don't remember, he was a running back at LSU who was a 0-star recruit and ended up being a really good player. I think played a couple of years in the league. So and I think a lot of coaches, to his point, a lot of coaches kind of feel that way. They don't, it's not to say that they don't dismiss the rankings and things of that nature, but they're going to go with their eyes and what they know and what matters to them when recruiting. It's not just going to be like, well, we're just going to recruit this guy because these other people say that he's the number 2 shortstop in the state. I want to see it for myself, and I want to see if this kid fits in my program. Things like that. So, it's don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Worry about what you're doing.
Nailed it. Thief of joy. You sound like Marcus Aurelius.
Well, history major. Yeah, I can hit you with some quotes every now and then.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's all we got for this week. Hopefully that was informative, thought-provoking, and hope you found it valuable. So thank you for listening, everybody. Tune in next week. We'll have more then. Thank you. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.